Hello and welcome to Eric Shapiro. Eric, for everybody watching, is a really good friend of mine from before this show. We actually knew each other. I had the honor of editing one of his books, Red Dennis, which is awesome.
Oh, thank you.
I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say this, but I may have nominated it for a couple of awards. But
oh, that's nice. Thank you so much. Thank you. No, I needed all the support I could get.
That was an excellent book.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. You know, what's interesting is, because I know we're going to talk about Tightser, my movie, is that Red Dennis, they're sort of similar in the sense that, and I've only realized this subconsciously, is that they both seem like they might have the potential to be like unduly scandalous, like particularly Red Dennis, like just the name and the cover, and Alessandra at Independent Legions did such an awesome cover.
Yeah.
Like it looks like it'll be like, oh God, what is this? Like what sort of toxic masculinity? And then I think it is, that book is extreme in a lot of ways, but on the other hand, kind of the point of it is to kind of audit where the line might be. And it's not like, a lot of people are like kind of surprised that like, oh, it's not as garish as I was like led to believe, like per the setup or per the way it was presented. And with Tightser, it's not even a garish expectation. It's more like, we'll get into it, like what sort of reactions that'll get.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things. I mean, I can't wait to see Tightser, because that's one of the things I loved about Red Dennis was I didn't know where you stood. It was a political. It wasn't really even a political statement. It was a statement on our culture today.
Yeah.
Without picking sides or making any one side necessarily. You balance that really well. I mean, obviously there is, but I was conflicted at the end as to what side was I on, where in the beginning of reading that book, I was like, I know what side I'm on.
Yeah.
You just raised so many questions.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad. I remember that was a big conversation we had where you said like you didn't know where I stood, and it was a little scary because I'm progressive. It's funny. I even like have over the years tested myself. Like I'll take online quizzes. Like I know where I stand on every issue, but I'm like, wait. Then I'll test myself. I'll be like, oh, I'm a socialist. Like I'm like really far to the left in terms of my fundamental priorities. But I'm glad the book masks it, although it's still daunting and scary that it masks it, because people will draw conclusions that can be irate or hysterical. And so that can be stimulating, but that can also be daunting in the cultural environment. But as you were saying, the point was kind of like that there is no binary, like, and then, you know, we're all human, and, you know, the spectrum is sort of like, the political spectrum is sort of like a language we use to navigate our differing perspectives and priorities. And that whole conversation has become so heightened, inflamed, and dangerous. So I sort of like went headlong into that. But interestingly, the book itself never got me in any hot water. Like I've had, because you know my wife and I own a newspaper, the Milpitas Beat. Like I've had more hot water over opinion editorials I've written, where it's like it'll draw like really irate responses. But Red Dennis in general is like more received as, okay, here's the character. This is a thriller. Like he's navigating, like where does he stand? What does it mean to stand here? What does it mean to stand there? Like, etc. But I'm really glad. Like I felt lucky I had you as an editor, not only because of your editing talent, but also because you hung with all of that. Whereas it could have quickly become like, you know, I'm some nefarious character.
Yeah, but that's what I loved about it, though, is because you did, even though, like, I think it was, I'm not going to say obvious, what, like, it wasn't promoting anything.
Right.
I'll say that.
True. Yeah.
But it was bringing it out to, like, look how this can happen. Look how things can spiral so out of control.
Yeah.
Like, and like you said, we are human. We're all human. There's nobody that's really like we demonize, but none of us are demons.
Yeah, well said. I mean, like, and I also think like social media, which is like such a part of our conscious awareness and navigation of reality, like has such a reductive impact on like how we perceive each other. Because I think it just the language of social media, how it's set up. It's like married or single. Here's where I am. Here's what I do for a living. Here's what I look like. So it's like it spurs all these automatic, very simplistic conclusions. And I think that saturated how we just deal with each other in general. And it's an interesting thing because I think we all have our online identity and personas, and then we have our in-person identities and personas. And me, as a journalist in my city and also in my region, like I always get along with people. I'm very light and easy. I'm actually very agreeable. And I'm always like, I like to laugh and things. And like people know my family and my kids. And it's interesting how online there's so many blind spots that there's this liability of being claimed in very simplistic ways. And when you combine that with politics where people have urgent, causes and objectives they want to drive home, it can get really vile.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something I just, on a side note, because I do want to get to Tightser and how you're going to be in tights, and I want to all these details.
Yes.
I'm a fan of you in tights. That might come across as wrong, so I pulled
No, it's good. No, I'm thrilled. Yeah. I need to discuss it with somebody I'm safe with. So
yeah. But I do want to point out, like, it's not kind of an odd thing. Is that's like super American, that division that we have? Because, like,
I don't know. I mean,
there's no real racism. We're not divided. It's more like, are you rich or poor?
That's it. You're saying where you live now.
Yeah.
And
in Brazil. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And that's refreshing to hear. It actually gives me hope because I think it's gotten worse in the past decade-ish in America.
It has.
Yeah, and I also think,
divided.
on the other hand, there's a lot of, I think the fever is broken in a lot of ways. I think a lot of people are also sick of the divisions. And I also, like, the whole conversation has become so delicate. I'm even scared to even say that, like, because then it makes me sound like a moderate, which I'm really not. Like, I actually think being a moderate is sort of like a sellout, like, oh, a little this, a little that, I'll just hang over here. Like, I don't think that's a very useful political, form of engagement. So I'm delicate around that. But I also think that being just like hyperbolically incensed and angry and yelling is just never functional. It's always like one drum beat away from war. So that's not something I can hang with. So, yeah.
Yeah, like I think like we can all have our different opinions and everything, and that's good. Why do we all have to be the same? And that's what the temperature in the United States has kind of gotten to be, is we all, if you have a different opinion, you're wrong,
Oh, absolutely.
Why can't you have it? Or why can't we might be wrong. Oh my God,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all tied up in bubbles too. I think that's a big part of it. Like, people are insulated in their own, like, often on social media, which is where you hear the most anger. They're just like, the algorithm is giving back to you what it thinks you like, and you cultivate a worldview that's all one thing, and you just have immense blind spots to the other side. So when you get exposed to it at all, you don't understand it. You think it's evil. You think it's scary and dangerous, and that's always like a real non-starter in a conversation when you're discussing anything political. I mean, if somebody can very easily shut you down by saying that what you're saying is dangerous, and also with the arts, that gets really bad, because it's like, wait, so if what I'm expressing without using actual violence can be dangerous, then what happens to the arts? Then it becomes very muted, and you're in this nightmare world.
Kind of the point of the arts, is my opinion. You know what I mean? The arts are to raise awareness, make us look at ourselves, raise questions.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Like, to raise consciousness.
Yeah. Which brings me to, why are you going to be wearing tights? And are they actually tights?
Crazy. I just realized just when you asked it, even though I was prepared, I'm so not used to talking about it. So this is good. This will be like very like new, and it's a little scary, which is why I'm making it, because I like to test myself. And this is, of course, different from a book. So I've directed films, like I've directed a bunch of shorts, but I also have made 2 features which were distributed. So this will be my 3rd feature.
Yeah, one of those is Jack Ketchum, isn't it? Like, you did one of his?
Oh, I did. Yeah, Mail Order, which is Ketchum, which is 16 minutes long, but which is ironically has more shots than one of my features. Like, my first feature, Rule of 3, had like 80 camera setups, and Mail Order, the Ketchum one, which is 16 minutes long, has like 150 angles.
Oh,
so
wow.
It's like really wild. It's insane. And he was really a nice person. Like, do you want to talk about like the ultimate gap between public perception and just being a sweetheart? And he also, he used a different name too. I mean, he was Dallas Muller. So that was one of the things. And I'm always in different areas. Like, I even made a feature film about a debate between a vegan and a meat eater, which was not dissimilar from the whole Red Dentist schematic, insofar as, like you were describing before, you have your starting point of where you think you're going to sympathize. And then as the conversation heats up, it's like, oh no, I'm agreeing with the person I thought I hated. Like, that's like, I love doing stuff like that. And stuff like that, of course, as you know, it's like totally out of fashion right now. So Tightser, I don't think Tightser will be provocative, at least not in that way. But I will say, oh my God, this is so crazy how new this is to talk about. Like, I've always, it's a good thing it's not a secret anymore, but it was for years. Like, I love wearing tights, right? So It's so, and it's not, I mean, it is cross-dressing fundamentally, but it's not necessarily the whole thing, like dressing up
Right.
as a woman. I like that too, but seldom. Like I've done that for Halloween. I guess in the more recent cultural environment, just being a woman for Halloween is ill-advised because it's sort of it correctly can be construed as mocking transgender
Right.
people. Or it's just like, so if a man dresses up as a woman, it's better. Like the last time I did it, I was a witch, you know, so it's a character. So, but the tights, that one garment, I feel that tights hold like a psychic power. Like I think when you mention tights, even saying the word and thinking about the way they feel, like there's something about them that's very erotic and thrilling, but it also for other people could be like just silly and funny, like ooh la la, like that's ridiculous, you know, like yeah. And when I was a kid, it was so funny. I'm so curious where this conversation will go. Okay, so when I was a kid, I loved wearing that, right? So it was a secret, right? It's like my mom's and my sisters, right? Like, so if I'm alone, I have like, okay, I have space here. They're not going to be upstairs for a while. I just loved it. And I always like part of the thrill, I only realized in retrospect, like decades later, was not feeling like I had to be such a boy. Like that was a big part of it. It's like, I remember like while I was doing it, like I would often say out loud, like, oh my God, I'm a girl. Like it's like, it was fun. It was like, oh my God. Like, so the garment very much allowed me to tap something more feline and sensitive. And like, you know, me as a writer, I'm very emotional and I'm a very sensitive person. Like, so like, so being around boys growing up, like, and I still have this a bit as an adult, it's a little hard for me to communicate with men because there's a sort of, oftentimes there's a sort of encoded programmatic behavior of like, we have to be emotionless and everything kind of sucks and we're broing and like, we're busting each other's balls. And it's like, it gets like, I can't stand it after a certain point. And I have so many close guy friends, but my close guy friends usually have a lot of interiority and are more psychological and creative. So I only like unpack this stuff with the tights, like as my life went on. And I've been with my wife for a long time. And I think she was the first or second girl, like we met in college, that I shared it with. And I realized over time that women, like a swath of women, like whether they're punks or they're more like out and out traditional, like really respond to it favorably. Like they're like, oh, like this is awesome. Like that's interesting too. Like, so there's a playful component, you know, where it can be part of your romantic relations, but there's also a very just liberating thing about it, right? So what happened here, and this goes hand in hand with what I just said about women liking it or in many cases responding to it, is I came up with a premise about a dystopia where tights are illegal. And it's not just tights, it's like all kinds of sensual garments. It's like lipstick, high heel shoes. So basically, by implication, you're dealing with some fascist, deeply puritanical, probably hard right, but that's not in the script because I don't want it to match our times too much. But like, probably more like a Nazi sort of fascist regime that wants all sexual relations to be procreative and is sort of anti-sensuality. So tights aren't just banned for men; they're banned for everyone, all genders. So it's like, and again, it goes back to the power I think they have. Like it's like there's just something about them, like nothing else feels like them, right? So I do think, like, especially with movies which are so visceral and sensate, I'm like, there's probably a movie there because you're showing the texture. And so I told my friend Shannon, who's a brilliant musician and also an entrepreneur, the premise. And unexpectedly, and I was going to do this just on an iPhone 14, like it'll look beautiful, it'll look very professional, but I was going to do it cheaper than my other movies, and I was just going to burn it down and do it for like $2,000. But she came out of nowhere. I get a text from her. She said, I will give you a real budget because I love this idea so much if I can do the music. I was like, of course you can, because their music is very synth. It's very, very brilliant. Like it was sort of redesigned what the movie is. It gave it a new metabolism. But then that was like such validation. And I feel good that I have her in it, not just as a co-creator, and then it's her and her boyfriend Jaime are both brilliant musicians. They're called Planet Mischief, and they're doing the score and they're also producing the film. So they already spent half the money. So I got all this gear. I'm casting it right now, and I'm the lead character. But it feels so good to have them supporting it because it is a vulnerable thing. Like I'm scared about it, and I know I'm talking nonstop. The last thing I'll say on this note is
that is literally what we're here for, Eric. Is for you to talk.
I'll sit quietly. Yeah, but on Instagram. So you're my Instagram friend. I have like 100 friends there. So I have a private account. It's literally only people that I actually know. And most of them I've actually met in real life. So like, you see me on there, like I'm always wearing, not always, but like every couple months, I'm like wearing tights, and I'm also like girling out, and I'm like, playing with, genderqueer constructs and letting the feline out. And I absolutely love it. Like, it's funny how some of my friends get it more than others. There's nobody, like, I would never have a close friend that didn't support it. But there are people that just like completely get it. They're like, yeah, you're like just a little bit of a woman. Like, it's like, it's, and I loved, rest in peace, he just died last year, Ray Liotta. Like, I feel that, and I don't know what his identity was as a man. Like, I know he did gay scenes and things like that, which is different. That's orientation. But he was very, like, he was just a very, there was a lot of feline to go with his canine. Like, he was just a very beautiful person. I think elementally with gender, it's a very life nourishing, enriching, just really positive thing to feel free within that and explore that. And also, by the way, as I talk about this, I'm aware, number one, it's not easy to talk about. And number two, people get insane talking about this, like from both ends of it. So I'm not really practiced with it, but I feel like the tights are such a symbol of how I feel about it. And I'm super excited and a bit daunted to do it, but that's what I'm working on.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
First, I want to say thank you for sharing that. You know what I mean? Because it is a vulnerable kind of thing.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm super open. So it's funny when you asked, I know I like only answered one question. It took like half an hour, but like when you asked the question, I was like, whoa, like, okay, like I'm about to talk about myself doing this as a kid. I mean, it's but it's totally, on the one hand, it's like, it's a big thing to share. On the other hand, it's like so commonplace. So
yeah, I find it interesting though, because like then, you talk about the feline and the canine, the masculine and the feminine, but it's interesting because superheroes wear tights.
Oh, that is interesting.
So it's like, is it like a balancing, maybe like a balancing, because there's so much machismo with that,
That is such a good point. That I didn't also, like, within what you're saying, superheroes are very much like spirits. They're like angels, and you and I have talked on the radio and personally about the psychic arts. Like, if you were to claim that there are angels or spirits or guides, like, they're not going to be on the gender binary. Like, they don't procreate. They're over there. They don't need a penis or vagina. Like, so that's not part of the deal. So they might have masculine or feminine elements, as all of us do, in whatever balance or configuration. So, and superheroes, I think, are very much adjacent to that sort of thing. And like, Christopher Reeve as Superman with the tights. I mean, like, it is I just watched those movies with my kids a couple years ago. And of course, like, he's a very masculine icon on some level, but there is an undeniably androgynous thing going on there. I think. Yeah.
Well, and in a way, I think it's almost, and this is my compliment to you.
Okay.
Superheroes have the balls to wear tights.
Oh, there you go. Right.
So, because you don't feel threatened. You don't feel like you have to have this construct of what is a woman supposed to look like? What is a man supposed to look like? You can blend them. And it's, women blend it all the time through history. Like, I can wear pants. I don't have to. But if you wear a dress, there's all the things, the baggage, and I love that you're just getting rid of it.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I sometimes think within this, and I'm not trying to throw the compliment away, because not only do I appreciate it, but I need to hear that, because this is a vulnerable thing. But I wonder if I'm a bit over leveraged, because I am confident and I'm very masculine seeming, you know what I mean? Like I'm very masculine. Like, I'm very, like, if anything, I've gotten in hot water throughout my life, like, because I'm too intense, So like, I've learned to manage, like, not to be intimidating. So I wonder if that gives me something of an advantage within the dynamic, where it's like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do, and if you don't like it, like, really tell me you don't like it. Let's see how. I wonder. Like, and I feel I don't know. This is probably the most controversial thing I'm saying, because it's so egoic. But I don't know if a guy that didn't have that particular issue would feel as free doing this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh,
we have a comment from the audience from AF Stewart. Historically, men wore tights and high heels because fashion shifts all the time. So.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. Those things are so fascinating historically and cross-culturally. Like, I remember one thing that just stands out, since we're like wide open at this point. Like, I remember a therapist telling me a long time ago that it was very recent to history and Western civilization for women's breasts to be eroticized. And that's just so amazing to think of because, I mean, like as a guy, and I'm sure I speak for most heterosexual guys, like, I mean, you just automatically have an erotic reaction. Like that is just, there's a very powerful charge there. So it's interesting to try and imagine like, oh, wow, that wasn't even on the board at one point. Like,
Yeah. And yet, and kind of like from my experience, my daughter, my second daughter is breastfeeding right now. So they come over for like a game day every Friday. So we basically have a house full of men and her, and they pop out because the baby has to eat and everybody's seen them and nobody reacts.
Right.
You know, and I think that's probably it. Like it's food, you know?
Yeah, it's context too. It's so true. And if you think about all our orifices, even our mouths, like they can be erotic, but they can be disgusting. So you just like, everybody knows how to like slide the compartment and deal with it. Yeah. Or hopefully most of us do.
Yeah. Well, when are we going to get to see Tightser? Like, what's the schedule?
Hopefully, like early next year. Like, let's say I'm going to shoot it in April and May, and then I think the post-production is going to be a little intensive because our other producer, RJ Savan, who's brilliant, he's also a big part of this. In addition to Shannon and Jaime with their music, is he brought the idea of doing special effects, and he has all the tools to do that, which is like an absolute privilege because we don't have we don't have that high a budget where it can be like a J.J. Abrams movie, but he's going to bring technology into it so it does look like a proper dystopia. Like, so there's like drones monitoring me and stuff. Like, so it's going to be, that's going to take a while. That might even be more intensive than the shoot. But shooting in April, May, then figure like 4 months of post-production, then hopefully into the fall we'll be polishing it.
Okay, well that's super exciting.
Thank you, thank you.
How can we keep up on this? Like, how can our viewers keep up on this? Like, to follow you.
Facebook. You're giving me a good experience practicing talking about it, which is so healthy. Like, it's been in layers. Like for years, it's like, okay, that's not something I'm ever going to tell anybody about. Then I shared it in intimate settings. Then I shared it with friends. Then I'm more open on Instagram, which is private. Then I've been like dipping my toe in the water, like on Facebook. So I'll update on my Facebook, and I'm sure we'll have a website. We were even talking about it, doing an Instagram just for it, for like guys in tights, whether it's like predominantly me, whether or not I'm showing my face, or other guys. And even a couple of my guy friends are kind of excited. They're like, ooh, I would do one. That's the other thing that goes on. Like when you go there, that's the thing about being kind of ultra. Like if you go there, like you're gonna, there's always gonna be fuddy-duddies that are like, oh dear. But on the other end, there's always people that are like, oh, this is exactly everything I wanted, and now I want to act this way too, and it's awesome.
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, and that is kind of what art does as well. We talked about like the purpose of art. It opens the door so that other people can entertain ideas. It makes it, not normalizes it, but legitimizes.
I think
is that a good way?
Yeah, well said. And there's sometimes as it's in the birth canal, like going from its inception into like creation into culture, like you can get rocky, like the ideas can be turbulent, and then you might look back and be like, ooh, those were the wrong ideas. Like everybody liked it in the moment, but there was something there that was like unseemly below the surface. But it's exciting. I mean, I think we underestimate the extent to which, as you're saying, like ideas are exciting to explore. Like when Shannon came with her beautiful angelic offer of funding this, and then I met with her and Jaime over Zoom, the first thing I said, it was kind of like throwing my hook in the water. I was like, do you agree with me that tights draw this sort of powerful reaction? They were like, absolutely, to the point where I think they couldn't even really verbalize it, nor did they really want to. Like they're like, yeah, it seems self-evident that there's just something there in the cloth, in the garment. And I'm like, the fact that we all feel that is really good, because you're going to make music, and maybe at some points that music will feel a little silky. You know what I mean? Like it's all a textural thing, and all that stuff to me is like my lifeblood, just like exploring aesthetics and ideas, like you're saying, and, seeing the reaction, as long as like nobody gets too upset.
Which is interesting. Like, so from my perspective, like when I wear like tights or stockings, I've always thought of it as armor, because I normally don't wear them. So to me, I'm going to my job, because I used to work in newspapers, which I think you knew. And you have to obviously dress up a little more than I normally do. And so that's what I'd always think of it. That's the only time I ever wore like tights or stockings, and so I was like literally girding myself for the battle.
That's awesome. They are. They're very like cocooning and insulating. They feel
Mhm.
very safe. That's such a good point. Like,
Yeah.
and then also like, and I'm so happy to hear you say that also because a lot of women, the more it's known that this is something I'm like into and about, women have a very typical reaction is more in the vein of like, oh God, they're such a pain, and they are like they're kind of hard to get in and out of. Like
Well,
it's a
yeah.
little bit of doing. So
That's so
there's
is
that, but
armor.
it's like, say again.
That's so is armor.
Yeah,
Like who
exactly. That's true. It's
puts
worth
on
it.
their armor and is like, "Oh, I love this. I'm going to sleep in it."
Right. Oh,
No.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is. Yeah, there is such an insulating component to them, and I also just love that they like you could. I guess you could talk about like leggings or yoga pants, but there's really no one-to-one real cross corollary for them. Like they're very
Mhm.
unique, and they're
Yeah.
also very they're sort of like a very privileged modern like high-tech thing, like the fact that they can be mass produced and be that efficient and stable and feel so good, yet
Yeah.
like they are a signifier of a developed country. Like if they're readily available, it's like wow, you can buy those for $5 and like yes, that's
Yeah.
interesting too, like
In a variety of colors and
in a variety
textures
of
and
colors.
yeah.
Yeah.
You may not know this,
Okay.
but you in tights is one of the turning points, I guess, where I was like, I like this guy.
Oh, thank you for saying. Oh, that made my day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you remember
Yeah,
a
I mean, it's not.
conversation
Look,
we
it's
had
not what
about that?
people. Thank you. I really. Thank you so much. Like, it is not what people are expecting, right? And I also like. So I'm from New Jersey. I'm Jewish, but I grew up around Italians, right? So I'm very Italian seeming, right? Like, very much grew up in gangster films. So I'm aware I have this sort of thing going on that can seem like either intense or whatever. Like, but yeah, I'm glad it clicks though too because it's such like it's such not only a part of who I am, but it's such an interesting thing because I'm not a very material person. Like I don't own a lot of things. Like we have a nice, my family has a nice way of life, and we're fine and everything like that. But like I personally like own of the four of us in the home, like I own nothing. Like I have my laptop, I have like a few items of clothing, we have our car. You know what I mean? Like it's very spare. So it's very
Mhm.
interesting that they're the rare physical object, like in the three-dimensional world, that allows me to express some aspect of me that's very fundamental. Yeah.
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 That's so awesome.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
So that's why when I saw you making Tightster, and I didn't know that you had like that you had a thing with tights before. I just kind of was like, because I think we were joking or something, and I said you should totally wear tights or something, and you
Yeah,
did.
exactly. Yeah. It's
And I
also
was
like
like, I
and this is
love
like
this guy.
my Instagram is like it's great. Well, since you're there, like it's
Yeah.
funny. Another thing I try and do, like what I was saying with Red Dennis, and thank you so much for the compliment. Yeah, is like kind of like okay, this seems real scandalous, but is this really so bad? Like that's like again, this is only sideways consciousness. I'm not
Yeah.
calculating it. I only realize in the output. It's kind of my nature too. It's like and this is kind of spoilerific, but not terribly bad. Like with Red Dennis, which has been out for 3 years, it's really not that violent. Like it seems like it would be like even when you're reading it, it feels violent, but very little violence happens in it. And I think there's only like a paragraph or two of actual violence, even though
Mhm.
you're in this like incendiary state. So I
Yeah.
realize while I'm creating that things like that are appealing. And I'm also really like I'm vegan. I'm very sensitive about violence. So I don't like rubbing people's faces in it, even if it's imaginary, you know?
Mhm.
So like, and of course I'm a dude too. So it's like I can also really enjoy an action movie where 5 people are getting their heads blown off. Like I'm not
Yeah.
pretending I'm all like guarded about it. But yeah, so it's funny, my Instagram, they're like tropes, like me in tights. Like there's and this is a weird one, which I think the line is shifting with mooning is such a thing where like but I don't think like I always felt it was right on the line because that's
Mhm.
also a gender neutral thing. Like it also like but I also think culture is getting away from that, like where it's not as benign as it was for a long time.
Yeah.
Even though it's interesting because where I live, it's not against the law, incidentally, but that's always been a big thing too. And then like with people that know me like my whole life, like my friends, like it's like that plus tights has become a thing. And then there's always shots of me crying. And what else do I do? Like bathroom humor. So it's like borderline. It's
Yeah.
borderline, but it's like I really like my objective is never to like create chaos, you know, like yeah, it's more about like what is a line? Like why would there be a line? Yeah.
Well, and that's what I always take it as. Like that's the message that I always kind of get is think about it.
Yeah,
You
yeah, yeah. It's
know?
like what's going on here? Yeah. I
Yeah,
think
and
that's
if
why we
this
came.
offends you,
Like
why? Think about it.
thank you so much. Yeah, I think I'm very much a question mark sort of
Hmm.
person. Yeah, I'm very like yeah, like And I love like Stanley Kubrick. Like it's all open ended. It's like
Yeah.
why be conclusive? Like we literally, and I know you and I are psychic. Like so we're tapped in and we have some perspective of what's going on beyond the veil. But
Yeah.
we also literally have no idea what's happening. Like what is this? Like we just yeah.
Exactly. Okay. Well, I want to shift a little bit and ask you about what is it like to make a movie. And I did.
Oh, yeah.
I will say I made one. I don't know if I ever shared it with you. Tarantulas. It was a terrible.
You told me about it. What was your role in it? What did you do?
Oh, the director. Like it was my story.
So was
it
short?
So. Yeah, very short.
You weren't happy with it.
Well, I was happy with it, but I don't think I expected how much work it was. Like, honestly, like I was like, oh yeah, you just stand there and go do this, do that. But there was an intense amount of, I will say, work and suffering and bleeding. Literally it wasn't easy. So that's what I want to hear from you. Was I just doing it really wrong, or is that the way it is?
No, that's a big no. I just want to ask you one more thing about it. So were you truly didn't think it came out good? Because I know you as a poet and as a writer, as a thinker. So, and then you're saying you bled for it. So but you don't think it worked out, or?
No, I think it did. I think it turned out really good. Yeah, and everybody did a phenomenal job of acting. We styled it like an old school thing, so it was like those old 20s where the black screen flashes up, and then the So,
right.
but
yeah, I mean, I know
it was just way more work than I thought.
Oh, got it. I got it. Okay, because I know you have a very high aesthetic, so I'm like, okay, a movie made by Angela Eureka Smith would have some value. Like I would be surprised if I just watched it and it was like anemic, like, oh. So that's good. I'm glad you feel it works, but it was just a tough process. Directing is hard. Definitely also with people like you and I who are used to writing. I'm not going to say writing is easier. That's not fair to the art of it or to writers, but it's a more monastic internal it's physically easier. Let's say that. I mean, that's quantifiable. The thing about directing, even in the apparatus I'm in now, which is so small, like a tiny crew, and it's so contained. I don't want to I'm like good friends with everybody working on it, so I don't want to throw this at them, but it's just part of this isn't happening with them, but it's part of the nature of the dynamic when you're doing it is you're always being judged. You're always being judged, like in the sense of like, can he, she, they handle it? How's this going to be? And then, people are creative. I mean, human beings are creative. Not everybody has creative talents or nurtures it or follows that star, but the people around you generally, if they're on a film set and they're capable of doing lighting or sound or costumes or whatnot, are going to have a creative spirit. So a lot of times they'll be like, this whole, all Eric's judgment is questionable, and they don't mean it. Like I'm easy to get along with. Like my sets are very light and good humored. So I don't want to create the wrong picture, but you feel it, like, and I'm not just being paranoid. Like that's always the hardest part of getting through the day, because it's like you're basically writing when you're directing. You are writing, but your head is open in front of everyone. That's like what it's like. It's like if you're sitting there writing and there were 16 people watching your thoughts, and it's like, and you had to run those thoughts by them for approval to actually get the lights set up and get the camera where it needs to be. So that's the most demanding part. It is hard. Also, in this case, I'm going to be acting, so it's daunting. And I love acting too. That's a whole other thing. Like always I haven't done it consistently in a while, but that was the path I actually thought I was on for a while. And all these things for me are like very, not interwoven, but they're very stacked. I think like when I wrote Red Dennis, for example, I felt I was just writing a monologue. Like it's just like it's a first person monologue that is carved and sculpted to be a novel, So and I'm kind of performing, and I kind of like I'm playing the character the whole time. So I think all these things go together. But what is it like? It is intense. Yeah, the days are really draining. I don't even know how to pronounce it, but I just learned I have it. It's thalassemia. I have a gene trait, and I have like little rings under my eyes, like. I have had, and my son Henry has it too. My father has it too. It like makes you technically iron deficient, even though you're in good health. So I realized that's like, oh my God, the day is so hard to get through, and I'm so exhausted at the end of the day. And I think that's part of it. And so I'm not like I definitely do have a lot of I am very cat-like in a lot of ways. So it's like I think I'm just gonna rest now. Like I think I worked hard enough. Like I want to curl up and rest and be like cocooned. But it's intense. It is. Directing also feels while you're doing it very artless. Like it feels completely industrial, banal. Like it's just equipment and gear. And I think the art comes before and after it. I think when you wrote your script and you set up your shot list or your storyboards and you brought the cast together, there's art. I think the cast members there are making art. They're being creative. But I think from the directing end, it feels so rote. Not rote, that's the wrong word, but it feels very unsexy. It's like, all right.
Yeah, like manufactured.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's definitely something I don't know if I'll jump into, but I'm glad I did it once, and I have mad respect for anybody that does it.
Thank you. I would
regularly.
love to see the movie. Yeah. It's you definitely. What's cool about it, particularly now, me being in my mid-40s, like when you do it, you are definitely going on an adventure. So it's like it's cool to have something like that where it's like, okay, there is adventure in my life. Like it's become, because of Shannon and Jaime producing it, it's become a business professional thing, which I wasn't expecting, which I'm totally welcome to. So that does bring components of it with contracts and insurance and like I was gonna do it anyway, and I want to release it anyway, but it raised the bar for the whole thing, and I just completely lost my train of thought. Like I forgot where I started on with that.
I mean, I agree with you on that. It's kind of like for a writer, you pay us for our book. What is it, like $1 or $2?
Right,
it's not like we're going to get wealthy, but because somebody is willing to invest money, it changes the dynamic. Now this thing has value.
Yeah,
but much more than $1.
Yeah, you have a little huddle and you're supported, and I think it was the adventure thing too. Also, like that is very much like it's so like the people I know in their 50s or even 60s that are active cinematographers are different from people I know at that age that are like selling insurance. You know, it's different.
Yeah.
It's like they're off on a boat in Antarctica shooting whales. And it's like they're having adventures, and I think that is really important for life. Like my mother was always so, and she's still with us, but she always growing up, she was so into the arts, and she's very creative. She's a painter and sculptor, and she's a professional, and she owns a gallery, and she's awesome. But she always the arts were such a huge thing. And as I get older, like with each new decade, I'm kind of like, there is something more than faintly ridiculous about being an artist. Like it is. It's like, and I don't mean to like side with the man or anything like that, but it's like. It's like the longer it goes, the more of an outsider you are. Even if you've succeeded within it, it's like, I'm still over here doing this. It's make-believe. But that adventure, I think, gives a lot of life to my spirit.
Yeah, I think it's kind of being a sacrifice. If you choose willingly to be an artist of any dynamic, of any medium, from writing to film to, painting, you're sacrificing yourself to the masses.
Right. Yeah. And I think
but we wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put it too, because then there's other roads you can take where you can use your creative talents and go into marketing, or you can do things where you're not exposed in the way you're saying. But if you're really expressing and exploring yourself and even growing yourself through the project, that's always a big thing for me too with my bigger projects. Like if I'm doing a short film, it probably won't be there. But if I'm doing a feature film or a novel or even a novella, there is also a growth thing. Like it's inevitable if you're exploring, as you're saying, sharing part of yourself that's previously unseen, like you're going to grow in it, in your community, in your culture. And like, you're going to come out different. It happened with Red Dennis. Like, I feel like despite that book's storyline and politics and all the things going on there, like it very much is a compendium of masculine traits. Like he's competitive. He has a big ego. He's like, he has a lot to prove. He wants to get over on his enemies. Like, he wants status. He wants to be somebody in the world. These are all like archetypally, not even man per se, but just masculine energies, which can be healthy and entirely unhealthy. And in his case, become very toxic. And I feel like, having gone through that and just like tried to summarize what is that and why are all those things there? It sort of is like a skin I shed, and it allows me to sort of be more open in the current instance of like, okay, like if you want to talk about gender, like here's where I am with that.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, I thank you for being brave enough to step out and to share with us and to create this. I'm really excited to see it. And whenever this is ready or like closer to time, I want to have you back on so we can talk about kind of the process, like what happened. Like we're at the beginning of it, and then I want to find out what happened.
Absolutely. We can talk about it post-shoot, and then 6 months after the release, we can talk about
see what happened.
Now, this is who I am now.
Yeah. All right. I have one final question, though. This is kind of like an off-the-wall one, but can you share something with us off your desk so we can
Yes.
get a little bit of a sense of who is the candid Eric Shapiro?
That's interesting. Well, I'll tell you. I don't have a desk. So that's number one. So I write, and this is because I was a ghostwriter for many. Now the answer is going to go on for 40 minutes. I'll make it quick. But I was a ghostwriter for many years, and so because of all the writing nonstop and deadlines, I started writing on the floor. So I write on top of a wooden crate on the floor, like just sitting, like I'm on the floor now.
Yeah.
So, but what I have, so within that crate are all the print copies of every book I've ever had published, every anthology I've ever been in. So Space and Time is in there, where I had a story for you guys. So it's all packed in there. And at the top of it is this, which is a letter from my grandmother after the publication of my first book. And it was the only one she lived to see. And it could not, I'm going to start crying. It could not have been more supportive. Where she just, my first book's all about mental illness. It's a short story collection where each character has a different mental illness. It's called Short of a Picnic. So she was always a very loving grandmother. She's very consummately loving and supportive. But you know, my work can be very subversive and shocking and inappropriate. So, you know, there she is. She read it. She was like 81. And she loved it. She wasn't just, she was like astonished, like, oh, this is what's inside my grandson's head. And but so this is her saying that. Yeah.
Oh, that is so awesome.
So I always have this right near me. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. That is super beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah. See, people don't expect. They're like, oh, they wouldn't think like, oh, he has his grandmother's letter. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I'm a very confusing sort. Yeah.
Well, and I always try to kind of guess a little bit. It's like my private game with myself. And so like, what would Eric have on his desk? And I actually was like, I think like tights or something, you know.
I was prepared. Yeah. Don't get me started. I was like, that would be like the best thing. But yeah. But they're not far away. They're not far away.
Yes, but that was beautiful. I love that.
But thank you so much. Thank you.
So thank you for sharing with that. So, all right. I guess that's about it. This went like so fast because there's so much to say.
Cool. Yeah.
We're going to have to say more.
I usually get nervous before these things, but I really, and I was telling my friends this earlier, I look forward to it because it was you, and I always enjoy you so much. And I think you're a real light in our community, our genre, in the arts, and I really appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much. And that's kind of like the whole point of the show is to kind of be able to give voice to these important things. So
absolutely,
I appreciate that. I certainly don't want to be threatening.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I was thrilled to do it. I'm thrilled to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody who joined us. I want to thank our anonymous sponsor this week. Very much appreciate the support for the show. And you know who you are, even though you want to remain anonymous. The next show coming up is really exciting. It is a friend of mine. Well, I say friend, but I just met her here in Brazil. And her name, I might be mispronouncing this, but it's Bruna Luisa Zipf. And she is going to be talking to us about Umbanda, which is it's a religion here. And the description is on that show, which is already scheduled now. So if you're watching this and you want to catch that next week, look on my YouTube channel. It's right there. You can go ahead and get a notification. And now it's time for our poet. Every week we have a poet that I select. And yes, it is my selection because, you know, it's easier to do this weekly with one person making the decision. And this poet this week is Amy Zollers with Inviting the Devil into My Kitchen. And next week's poet is Naomi Simone Borwin. And she is going to be reading her poem, Free Fall in the Nth Extinction. Beautiful reading from both of them. And that's where we'll close. Thank you so much, Eric, for coming on. And I hope you're not going to be a stranger because I want to hear more about this Tightser.
I'm looking forward to more. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everybody who watched, and have a great week. Bye.
Bye.
Inviting the devil into my kitchen. Do you know how many times I have resisted buying the porcelain creamer jug emblazoned with Nick Cave's own watercolor painting of the devil himself, for which shipping cost as much as a second creamer jug altogether, for which I would bring another year of curses down on top of my head? 5 times, man, possibly 6. Thank you. That was Inviting the Devil into My Kitchen. I am grateful to Angela Eureka Smith for including me in the Publishers Showcase. My name is Amy Zollers. I have a sort of rudimentary website that is in a holding pattern called amyzollersart.com, but it's got links to all of my Instagrams, at hypness_and_outrage. It doesn't really have a link to my podcast, but listen to podcasts in A minor because it's kind of fun. And I don't know, I'm going to grab a random poetry book off the shelf that I've written that you should art race. Go ahead, change your life. Art Race is available on Amazon.com. It's got art and race. It's got poetry and art about, like musicians. That's Nick Cave. Nick Cave did a watercolor of the devil himself on a creamer jug, and I keep resisting it because you know what? I learned my lesson. There's Nick and Blixa as dolls. Oh, okay, one more thing. Let me find where they're sharing the sweater. Did I put that in this book? Somebody tell me what I put in my poetry book. All right. Oh, well, Roland S. Howard. So you get your post-punk, you get a little British invasion, you get some poetry that is frothing, pretty much. All right. Art Race, thank you for listening to Inviting the Devil into My Kitchen. I'll see you next time. Not on this, on other things. See ya.